So hello everyone, welcome to this session with Chaikuni Witan. He will be talking about finding connection in the depth of trauma. So before introducing Chaikuni and his work, I will quickly introduce myself. For those that don't know me, my name is Jasmine Verdi. I am currently based in Mexico, living in San Miguel de Allende. I work for an independent publishing company called Synergetic Press. We publish books on psychedelics, consciousness, ecology, ethnobotany also. We here this August with co-publishing a Chaikuni anthology on psychedelic justice. You can go to the Synergetic Press booth at the expo and get 20% off the book and pre-order your copy. Also, I work as a freelance writer, writing for Chaikuni, Psychedelics Today, Lucid News, among others. I actually had the pleasure of talking with Chaikuni some months ago when I was doing a series of pieces for Chaikuni on the theme of COVID and how COVID is impacting different ayahuasca communities. And in particular, this article was about how COVID impacted ayahuasca facilitators in the States. So that's a little bit more about me. As for Chaikuni, he has been a student of Shipibo Plant Medicine for the past decade. And he has been leading healing journeys and men's work, and is based in Brooklyn. He grew up in a kind of mixed culture or mixed race upbringing, and like myself, he never really felt like he fit in anywhere. So, but also being a chameleon that can shift into both sides of the dialogue, he had a politically active upbringing, and is really committed to depth and intimacy in his work and his plant medicine work. And about his talk, he will be talking about trauma and how trauma is often closer to home than we might think. He kind of moves beyond systemic issues and talks about trauma as something that generally stems from our childhood and family upbringing more than anything, and focuses on trauma as a way to connect us and erase our boundaries that our modern world is so permeated by. Actually, I found a quote from Bearhart, who is a Muskogee Creek Nation medicine man. He wrote a book called The Wind is My Mother. This quote really speaks to what I feel like the essence of Chaikuni's talk points to as well. And the quote goes, "It is time to stress the things we have in common with one another, to show how much alike we are. We might be surprised to find that we are all truly brothers and sisters in this universe, and most importantly, that we have to maintain that relationship in order to grow." So I would like to invite Chaikuni to the stage and give him the opportunity to speak and share his talk with you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you everyone for taking the time and tune in and listen to what I have to say. As Jasmine said, the essence of the talk is really trying to look beyond a lot of things that people talk about when they talk about trauma. And, we live in a time, especially, the last year or so, that there's a lot of conversation and awareness, thankfully, about issues dealing with racism, sexism.
Technical issue, but we're back.
Am I back?
I can see and hear you, so yes, we're here.
Okay, yeah. So I was saying that for me, working with plant medicine has really changed a lot of how I understand a lot of things, like really what it is to be a human and how people work and trauma, and ultimately really like the nature of reality. But that's a subject for another talk. One of the things about the way that we work in the Shipibo tradition is it's very much on an individual basis. The ceremonies are in a group but we sing to people individually. And I personally like to take a lot of time, like doing before and after sort of intake conversations to really have a very clear sense of what's happening with people. And it results in a very intimate and a very personal understanding of what's going on. And it helps people to really lead to a very profound understanding themselves and the trauma. And it's odd because in some ways you wind up having a relationship or a deeper understanding of someone than, their family does, their partner, their shrink, often than they themselves did beforehand. And so what does this have to do with these structural issues? So I work with a relatively ethnically diverse group of people. I mean, ayahuasca is a pretty white game still, but it's, I'd say it's a relatively diverse group of people. And what I have really seen is that as bad as the societal stuff is, what people of every color, of every income bracket, who speak every language, talk about when they get to the deep things that they want to work with have nothing to do with the society in the outside world. It's stuff that happened in their family, generally when they were very young, generally in their family, generally when they're very young. And there's certainly an interplay between society and what happens in their family. But the direct point of impact, is generally in their family, someone close to their family, and something that happened when they're very young. And, the big issues tend to be not feeling safe at home, lack of attention from their parents, lack of role models. I mean, pretty classic physical abuse, abandonment. And what really, really kind of broke my heart as I got into this work is that really the most common thing they're working with, and often the most damaging thing we're working with, is different kinds of childhood sexual abuse. That's often, about what 2/3 of the people in a given ceremony are working with. So, and as I was saying, like these issues tend to injure people, like regardless of what they look like, how much money they make, where they were born. So what I would like to do is just take a little moment and read to you a few people's stories. And then I'm gonna ask you if you can guess what these people look like, where they came from. All right, number one. I was born into an unsafe environment that involved childhood sexual use at the hands of my father and other men in our family circle, which years of sexual psychosis and self-harm. My own childhood sense of creativity and self-empowerment took a few years in early adolescence to die completely. But die it did. I spent over 30 years caught in the cycle. Intensive Western addiction and trauma therapies did little to restore balance to my system. Regardless of the successful and loving environments I tried to embrace in adulthood, the darkness always returned, and I continued to pay the price. No positive and loving environment was enough to unwind the cycle, seemingly proving that early trauma and causality for my continued traumas as an adult and not effective at restoring me to sanity. It wasn't until I found Amazonian plant medicine that I encountered a modality strong enough to clear up those traumas and begin to embrace the support I had around me as an adult. That's one person. The next is being rejected from conception, the mental trauma. My mother did not love my father, him out of convenience. This rejection, along with gaslighting, continued insidiously through my childhood and my adulthood. This affected my sense of self. I did not know how to love myself. I felt to be taken advantage of by others. Since working with medicine, I am beginning the process of rendering the unconscious conscious. So now I'm beginning to understand who I am and beginning to heal. The next one here is working with the trauma that my father felt from the passing of his mom at a young age and his siblings more recently. Processing the fact that I didn't show understanding, passion for his needs. I was an asshole and I lost my temper and said things that no shouldn't say to his father. Through the medicine, I was able to see that his addictions are a cry for help and see a way towards helping him. So that is for people. And I guess if we were live, I'd ask you to guess, these people look like. But I'll just tell you. The first one, was a white man born a very prominent artistic family in a cultural city. The second one is a Black man who actually lives in Minneapolis, which is, a very interesting time for racial things these days. And the last one is a Colombian American guy. And let me just read one more. This one kind of has a little more of that, I guess. My father physically and sexually abused me as a child. It made me guarded and distrustful as an adult, but at the same time, gullible and easily manipulated, not understand healthy boundaries. An extreme sense of unworthiness made me susceptible to sexual risky behavior and abusive relationships. After coming to understand and working on integrating my trauma, I now am in a healthy relationship with a wonderful, kind-hearted person. My relationship with my sexuality and embodying identity. I do not fear men taking advantage of me, as I know I am in control of me. As I'm beginning to open up to people and build deep, meaningful friendships and healthy boundaries, and I have the courage to leave a job that I did not love and found a career that meets my emotional and financial needs. Most importantly, I love all of me. And that last one is from a white woman who, again, grew up in a fairly middle-class family here in the States. So, as I hope that this will seem to you, like it's trauma is really, like, these essential traumas really are colorblind. People talk about things about being colorblind, but trauma, in my assessment, really is. And I kind of liken it to, the situation with Western medicine, right? If you go to the doctor, it's not really that important what color you are. I mean, there's certain things, Black people slightly more likely to have type 2 diabetes, white people slightly more likely to have type 1 diabetes. But like all in all, it's the same. And I really feel that's how it works with trauma as well. So this leads to what I like to call the heretical question, right? Which is, there's a lot of talk right now, thankfully, about how destructive marginalization of individual population groups are, and baked in racism and sexism and whatnot, like baked into our society. And so my question is it possible that our individual traumas that exist totally in a vacuum from all this are actually more profound than the categories that society has driven us into? And I feel like there's likely to be a little bit of pushback from activist perspectives. There's a lot of the progressive thought seems to be motivated or fueled by like activist and academic perspectives. And I feel like this isn't really a conversation that I hear there very much. And I'm thinking about how I got to my perspective and they got to their perspective. And what it seems to me is, as I was emphasizing in the beginning, like the nature of the work that I do tends to be very, very personal. Academia, not so personal. I mean, activism takes many forms. Obviously, protests are not so personal, but there's workshops and things, but there's often, I feel like, not so much the emphasis on really like getting like deep into the essence of things. And so, that difference, I feel like, is what has led me to this kind of heretical perspective and how to move things forward. And it also really, this perspective really kind of gives me a lot of hope in a certain sense, because the conversations are so divisive now. I mean, divisive almost to the point of insanity in the past couple of years. And what I really see is that when people heal together, they really see the similarity in the traumas and what they're dealing with. And that creates a bridge, a bridge from which they can understand people who look different than them, who sound different than them, who make more money, who make less money, who like to have a different kind of sex. And I feel that connection, and that's why it's called connection, the depth of trauma, that when we really dig into the roots of our trauma, we see our humanity, and that allows us to see other people's humanity. And that engenders compassion and connection. And that is really like why I see this kind of healing process as the biggest antidote to the kind of animosity that we have in the world between different kinds of people. And I see it as, ultimately like the bridge that can hopefully bring things together and be the antidote to what is increasingly and heartbreakingly a more and more indecisive world. So that is the essence of it. I feel like we have a lot of conversation about societal issues, about structural issues, and we have this renewed interest in plant medicine and psychedelics, and also in other healing, other alternative healing modalities that are, there's, somatic therapy. It's sort of a new thing. There's like a lot of things that basically work better than things that we used to do before. And these things have the ability to get us to the essence of ourselves and allow us to heal ourselves individually and then connect, and come back more into understanding that we are all part of the same human family. Thank you very much.
Okay, does everyone hear me? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you so much, Chaikuni, for sharing with us. And I'll move on to some of the questions that are in the Q&A. So first of all, from Amaku Ukwang, what does your name, Chaikuni Witan, mean? I think I'm saying the second part wrong. It's Witan, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So as I was saying, I studied with the Shipibo, an indigenous tribe in Peru. And at a certain point in the studies, they give you a Shipibo name. And so Chaikuni is the name of these protective spirits that at one point in ancient lore protected this village, which is sort of like the spiritual center of the Shipibo community, from some bad things that are happening. And actually, like they flew the village to the top of the mountaintop. And that's what the Chaikunis did. And then Witan is actually my given middle name. And it's an old Anglo-Saxon word that meant like a council of wise men, or a council, like a legal council. And so that's from part of my given name.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And okay, from Cynthia Renta, what is your feeling?
That's a great question. I actually use other people's definitions of healing. A friend of mine says this thing: healing is an increase in your capacity to deal with reality, to navigate reality. I have sort of a working, less of a definition, but like a working approach, which is healing is really the ability to be present to pain and difficulties. And that is a function of feeling safe. Like, you need to feel safe to do that. And the etymology of the word heal, actually, it means to make whole. So those are some of the ways that I like to look at it.
Yeah, I guess if it's etymologically related to make whole, it's very similar to the word integration too, which is lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question from Lisa Newcomb. Is this process similar to the idea that suffering is part of the human condition? How does healing come?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Is this process similar to the idea that suffering is part of the human condition? How does healing come?
Which idea? My definition of healing, or the whole
Yeah,
talk?
maybe Lisa, could you refer to which process you're talking about, and we'll come back to that question. Okay, so there was another question then from Fruiting Bodies Collective. Can the individual and systemic harms and healing coexist as valid and essential?
Can the individual and systemic harms coexist? Yes. Yes, they can. Absolutely. And there's definitely interplay. I mean, there's a lot of research that says basically if you have X trauma and you grow up in a more disadvantaged place, then that trauma will have more impact on you, right? And I couldn't dig it up, but one of my participants, she grew up in China, and she wrote this really beautiful piece about her parents had done all these horrible things to her, but she realized that it was really a function of the repressive Maoist regime, and they just basically took it out on their family, on her. So yeah, there absolutely is interplay. And the main thing I wanted to focus on in this talk is that the point of impact that I personally, doing this work, have found to be most destructive is within the family. But that doesn't mean that there's not, things from the outside causing that, or that, all people in all places in society have equal ability to heal and navigate from traumas.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And another question from are you saying that individual traumas are not rooted in historical and systemic issues? For example, hierarchies of worth?
No, no, I'm not. I mean, no. I mean, it's sort of the same answer. To me, the same thing. Like, yeah, I mean, a lot of what we work with is generational stuff, like on the individual basis. And again, like these external things hugely impact the individual unit. What I'm saying is the most destructive point of impact is, again, generally from the personal sphere within the family.
And Caitlin Riley asks, how do you feel the communities, for example, New Rao, are dealing with trauma specifically related to COVID and loss of life and loss of income? How do you think they can heal going forward?
How communities specifically, such as Niue Rao?
That was the one she gave as an example, yes. Are dealing with trauma, such as related to COVID, loss of life and loss of income. How do you think they can?
With great difficulty. Yeah, honestly. I mean, I know the workings of a few centers in Peru, and it is very difficult. I know a few people have died. Actually, a shaman, I know his son died of COVID, and it was pretty intense actually. And people were trying to figure out how to send money to get him an IV, and then it just happened immediately. So it's been really impactful. There's both the personal injury. Again, another guy I know, he actually went back to his family's place. He'd been working at a center. I know his family's place outside of Acalpa, and I texted him, he's like, everyone in my family has COVID. So it's been very difficult. And and then financially, these are communities and centers that are, they make their living off of people coming there, and people have not been coming there so much, really at all. I mean, I was in Peru from late February last year till August. And I think I was at the center and nobody showed up because nobody could get there. And I think the borders opened again in October. I forget. So it was very difficult, I think dispiriting. And then, cause it's the maestros, that's what they do. They run ceremonies, they sing songs, they heal people, and then they're not doing that. And then they don't have any money. So it was challenging. And most of the centers I know, they had fundraising efforts for that center. I know Temple did. I know Niue Rao did. But yeah, it has been a challenge all around.
And in terms of going forward, like how do you foresee them healing from this difficulty? That was the second part of the question.
Well, like the rest of the world, with a little bit of difficulty. I mean, the centers that I know most about, they're definitely getting back to business. And, I think the spirits are lifting, the income is increasing. And I think, again, like a lot of the world, it's kind of going to be a long slog, because it's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Okay, so another question from Sven. Do you have any recommendations if past trauma comes up during psychedelic experiences or even during normal life for users or those giving company to them? Like general do's and don'ts in such a situation?
Yeah, that's a very broad question. Well, one thing is you should know that you have a choice of whether you want to go into it. Like really going into it when you don't feel supported or you don't feel safe, whether that support and safety comes from you, a friend, a practitioner, a security blanket. Like if you don't feel it, going into trauma can be re-traumatizing. So I'd say the first thing is really like honor your decision and your agency in whether you want to go into it. And then beyond that, again, depending on the situation, definitely, I say this to all my participants, like, feel free to ask for help. People do not ask for help enough. They do not ask for support enough. So I'd really recommend that. And then again, depending on what's coming up, I would recommend, like, hopefully you have someone you can talk to or you can share about it. Again, at the same time, if it's something you don't feel this is a time to talk to or talk to someone about or share about, that's also completely fine, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, without having a more specific context like that, those are sort of the best things I can do. Is just really honor where you're at and ask for help and, think about, try to share, but if it doesn't work, don't. And then also really cultivate your relationship with safety. This is something I talk to all of my participants about, because a lot of us don't really think about this very much. And, as I was saying, in my understanding of healing, in order to be present to those difficulties, you need to feel safe. So whatever you can do to cultivate that relationship with safety. And then, maybe going forward from the incident, if you have some integration people you can work with or some practitioners you trust, that can also be very helpful.
And another question, perhaps it's kind of similar, but by CJ Healy. As a facilitator, what is your process for helping participants make sense of memories that come up during experiences? For example, traumas from early childhood events they had no awareness of.
Well, it's a very pertinent question. I'm actually running a retreat this weekend, so I'll just think back 10 minutes ago to what I was doing before this call. There's a few basic things. One is people do not, I tell people you don't need the memories, you can work with the emotions, and that quest to find out exactly what happened often does not serve. You're sort of trying to heal by understanding, and you don't heal by understanding. You heal by feeling. Trauma, at its essence, it's an experience that the organism could not deal with. It couldn't reconcile with the sense of itself, so you didn't deal with it. So you didn't deal with the emotions, which was healthy. It protected you. So now you have to deal, if you want, to the extent that you want to heal the emotions and deal with those traumas. So you just need the emotions, really, not so much the information. Another thing is, as I was saying before, take it at your pace. Take it at a pace that makes sense. And what else? And another thing is, I really try to encourage people not, like, you ask people if they start to recount it, you're like, how do you feel in your body right now? Because the recounting can be re-traumatizing. And yeah, so usually, you know, it's about basically engendering safety and then asking them to look at it, you know, at the speed that they feel works best for them. And then another big thing is you're like, you have these memories, like, did this really happen? A lot of times you're like, I can't believe this. And did this really happen? Maybe I'm going crazy. Very common. Maybe I'm going crazy. And undoubtedly, there's a lot of shared energy in the ceremony. So sometimes other people's stuff drifts in. What I tell people is if you're trying to figure out if it really happened, just ask yourself if it makes sense. You know, look at your life with the possibility that this thing impacted your life. Does your life make sense from that trajectory? You know, does the trajectory of your life make sense with the idea of that impact? If it does, it's probably pretty likely. If it doesn't, it's probably not that likely. So yeah, that's sort of the essence of it.
So many wonderful questions appearing here. I want to try to do them all justice if we have enough time. So, okay, so one from Lisa. There's been discussion in several sessions during this conference about the integration afterwards. Can you talk about what you've seen with follow-up care?
What I have seen with follow-up there. Like
follow-up care, like
follow-up care.
Yeah,
Follow-up care is very important. And it can take different forms, you know. There's a couple people that I generally recommend to my participants who they have some shamanic training and they also have somatic experience training. And like, to me, that's the optimal, you know. You want someone who knows medicine and then, you know, has these more therapeutic modalities come in. And yeah, follow-up, it can be very important. To be honest, I didn't used to think integration was so important. That was when I was young and I didn't know anything. It's amazing how many bad ideas we have at the beginning of this process. But a lot of people, yeah, like, you know, they say, there's this thing that people say that the ceremony is not the work. Ceremony is the lesson plan, you know, and going home and putting that into action is the work. And it can be very valuable to have some guidance with that. And you can do the individual thing, you know, if you have the resources. There's often, you know, group integration circles. And also, you know, a lot of that I tell my people is spend time in nature, you know, like take care of your body, some very basic stuff, you know, clean up your relationships, you know, get the bad people out of your life, love the good people. Yeah, you know, listen to your heart. Some sort of very kind of basic, kind of like bumper sticker wisdom, but like it really works. It really works. So those are a couple of approaches that I recommend for people.
And Andrea Gomez asks, what feature of the medicine, the compounds / set and setting, do you think are critical for allowing safe disassociation of the individual and their trauma?
Did you say safe disassociation?
Yeah, I think maybe that word was, I'm not sure about that word, but I guess, yeah, maybe making the individual feel safe and being able to go into their trauma.
Yeah, safety is very personal, you know. And I've seen places that seem less and more safe. I mean, the place I study, the shamanism is phenomenal. They don't do the best job making people safe, unfortunately. So it's given me a lot of cause to think about that. I mean, what I do is, first of all, I really emphasize developing a personal relationship with the participants. They do a questionnaire, I do an intake call, I talk to them when they get there, I do relatively small groups, I get people there early so they can hang out and get to know each other, so that sense of safety and being held in the collective, in the community of the retreat. And then really attending to people's needs, you know, like making them know that they can ask for help. We have a few agreements that we ask everyone to do to make things more safe. And one of them is confidentiality. So you know that nothing that you share will be shared outside of the circle. And then, you know, one thing I think is really important for all practitioners is to like really work on your shit, you know, like to keep cleaning yourself and healing yourself so that you can have the highest integrity possible. Because you have a very intimate relationship with very intimate parts of people that have often been deeply traumatized. And so you really want to focus on keeping your stuff really as clean as possible. And no one's perfect, you know, but like that, to me, like that is the meditation, you know, and that's a lot of what makes people feel safe. And then you also like niceties, just like maybe having some nice music, you know, and like just some things just to make the environment feel, more safe.
And Amaku has another question. Can you articulate what you believe is the connection between trauma experienced by European people in European history and the creation and continued practice of white supremacy?
I mean, I don't think I have a better answer for that than most people. But well, I mean, one thing about white supremacy, I mean, I feel like racism is not a particularly American thing. You know, it's just, it's in black and white here. It's very easy to see, you know, but like if you go to Europe, you know, and there's been all sorts of things there that, like, you look at what's happening in Sudan, that there's people all over the world are trying to get up on the other person. And what is remarkable about the Europeans, I think, is not so much their depravity, but the effectiveness of the colonial system in allowing them to put that on other people, you know? And, that said, England, was by far the most effective colonial power ultimately. And it's a dark, cold place, and
it really is.
Yeah, it really. There's a lot of repression. I read this thing, I forget where it's really originally from, but in Sex at Dawn, and they said like the Victorian Empire ran on sexual repression. Like that was the force that moved things forward. And I think there is some validity to that, and I talked to this guy who, he's an English guy, but he went to an English South African boarding school in South Africa. And they would basically like encourage the kids to fight and beat each other up so they would like become monsters, so they could be good soldiers. And there's lots of stuff like that. Like someone was telling me that it was common practice for samurais to like sodomize their apprentices, just like to make them badasses and really want to protect themselves. So I feel like that fostering of hostility and violation, I just think the Europeans were really good at that, particularly the English. And then they spread that around the world. That's my pet theory. I don't know. I'm sure other people have better knowledge of history, can answer better, but that's kind of my understanding.
And okay, so moving on. Another question from Cynthia Renta. Have you ever experienced having someone have a psychotic break, recounting their trauma during your work with them? If so, how have you dealt with that?
I have not experienced someone having a psychotic break when I was working with them. There was someone last year who was at the center that I was at. She had a minor schizoid break. We didn't understand what was happening at first. We just thought she was very annoying, to be honest. But then I wasn't the practitioner, and in that case, it just landed. Like she landed, and she's like, "Oh my God, this is what happened," and it made sense. But no, I don't. No one in my care has had anything like that happen. I've seen a few things like that happen in the jungle where I study, but honestly, I think part of the issue there is they don't really as I was saying, like the shamanism is amazing, but like the facilitation, the personal care is a little bit absent. And I think what happens then is either you don't have the awareness to like monitor what's happening with the person, or the ability to provide the support to keep them stable. Yeah, but yeah, I've never really had, had it happen with someone I was working with directly, and nor have any of the practitioners I keep up with.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that about people having that kind of spiritual emergency in the jungle? It relates to a question that someone else asked them. But I mean, was language barrier an issue for people experiencing that in that setting?
I mean, the facilitators generally speak English, so not so much. Yeah, no, not so much. But I thought it's better if you speak Spanish, for sure. For sure. I mean, the thing is, like, the maestros are not really, they're not really about the day to day. You know, you come in, they sing you a song, and then you go, and then they go back and hang out with their families and come back to ceremony. And it's the Western facilitators who are like getting you through the day to day. Yeah.
Okay. And a question from Sean Lawler. Have you found that any specific approach to healing trauma, whether from a therapeutic school or other framework, is particularly effective and accessible?
Pick one. I mean, I do what I do because it's the most effective thing that I found, like unequivocally. It's not the most accessible thing, for sure. But yeah, plant medicine, in particular Shipibo Plant Medicine, cannot say enough good things. MDMA therapy is pretty amazing. And then, somatic therapy, different somatic therapy approaches. I'm not super versed in them, but, I've seen people have really amazing results. And it also, it depends on who you are and who your trauma is. People are individual, and trauma is individual, and healing is individual. So yeah, I don't have like a clear answer to that.
And also another one from Fruiting Bodies Collective. Is it the responsibility of the facilitator holding the catalyst/container to ensure that those seeking healing are resourced before and after for prep and integration or integration?
Unequivocally, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason people have problems, like I don't really have a lot of participants who, they have hard times, but things don't really blow up. And I see other people who have more problems, and I think they don't have the information, they don't have the preparatory stuff, they don't have the sense of safety, and they don't have the safety net afterwards. And it can be more problematic. People also just kind of come in out of the blue knowing nothing and have great experiences. It's not like something will definitely go around. It's something that will definitely go wrong, but yeah, it's very important to have that safety, those safety structures in place.
And Catherine Akbar also wrote, a participant wrote on another session that vomiting is a sign of emotional resistance. I recently had a tremendous...
No. No. Next question. That's ridiculous. Okay. Vomiting is things being cleaned out of your body. Yeah.
Okay. So Andrea Kittelson, how do we navigate personal healing as a means for spiritual systemic change in a violently individualist capitalist society?
How can we do that? That is a good question. Well, I guess I would have two answers. One is individual healing allows you to connect to other people, and brings that openness and healthiness out into the broader community. So that is very good. And to be fair, the way that I work is really focused on individual healing. So I'm a little bit biased in that direction. And then in terms of collective healing, there's a few things. One is, as I was saying earlier, like if you're in a healing circle, it's relatively small with people who do not look like you, that engenders, bridges that can be very helpful. And then, yeah, and to be honest, collective healing is really not my forte, you know. And I think it's kind of the same process, though. It's like just bringing together different kinds of people and sort of understanding our commonality, or bringing together similar kinds of people and understanding their commonality. One thing is people often really think that their traumas are very individual, and a huge part of healing is sharing and understanding sort of the non-uniqueness of your trauma. And this may sound kind of, to me, like a great model. It's like the early house music scene, you know, very culturally diverse. People got high and danced and collected and opened up, and, you know, and that really, I mean, I've talked to people who come out of that, and it's really like this huge collective healing across different cultural lines, you know. And not that that is the answer all, but that's sort of like that is the model, you know. And sort of this like a individual like healing or awareness of divinity, an individual experience it in a group with a large number of other people, and then they're like, oh my gosh, this is the truth, and that could really bring people together.
Yeah, I like the comments in the chat about loving house music and yes to Detroit techno. Yeah, since we only have a couple of minutes left, I also had a question which might be a nice one to end on. But what is the ultimate vision about how to address societal-wide issues around marginalization, etc.?
My ultimate vision about how it really is about personal healing. It really, really, really is, you know. Every time somebody does something bad to someone else, someone who doesn't look like them, someone with a different sex than them, it's because they were injured, you know. You don't grow up in a loving, warm, nourishing, supportive family and be like, yo, I'm joining the KKK today. Like, it just doesn't happen, you know. So the thing is to allow to have everybody heal these wounds. And one thing that I think is really often overlooked in sort of in broad, like the broad boilerplate progressive agenda, is the need of the people who are injuring us to be healed. You know, that the way they're traumatizing us is a function of their trauma. And since we're understandably like focused on acknowledging that we have been traumatized, which has not been acknowledged enough, and that takes us out of acknowledging that they have been traumatized. And I think it's important but difficult to recognize like everybody needs a certain amount of dignity and space to heal. And so, yeah, that is really what I see, is that every individual, through whatever modality is available, is allowed to do their healing work. And that, you know, that is really what, it's the only answer. It is really the only answer. Like, legislation is not going to work. Affirmative action is not going to work. Those help. I mean, those are absolutely necessary, but the structural changes do not change what's in people's hearts, you know, and those structural changes are imposed upon people, and they're like, okay, well, I have to not say this or do that. Then like resistance will build up, resentment will build up, and they might be well behaved while you and I are in the room, but like it's gonna build up and come out later, you know? And so we need to give everybody permission and space to dive into their traumas at the same time that we put in the structural and legal stuff. So basically, everybody needs to drink ayahuasca. That's what I meant to say.
Well said, Chaikuni. I 100% agree with you in the idea that trauma is universal, and I mean, as the Buddha said, and the first noble truth is suffering. So here we are connecting through our pain. Thank you. We're out of time. I think for those who are in this chat, I'm going to head to the connection room and maybe be around for chatting. But yeah, thank you so much for speaking and sharing with us and everyone who participated in this session.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, have a great afternoon, wherever all of you are.